On a cold stretch of the North Dakota prairie, you could see the glow from miles away. Fires, headlights, floodlights, and the moving line of people who refused to leave. They weren't calling themselves protesters. Many called themselves water protectors, and their message traveled farther than any pipeline route. Water is life. This wasn't just a clash over construction equipment. It was a collision between two ideas of the future, one fueled by oil and speed, and one anchored in treaty rights, sacred places, and the belief that a river isn't a resource, it's a relative. In 2016 and 2017, the resistance at Standing Rock grew into a movement that drew thousands of supporters across the U.S., and it became one of the most visible Indigenous-led campaigns in modern American history. Britannica. But the story most people think they know, dogs, arrests, water cannons, headlines, is only the surface. Tonight, we're going deeper. How a pipeline route became a flashpoint. How youth organizers helped ignite a global movement. How federal decisions swung like a pendulum. Pause, deny, reverse, approve. And how Standing Rock changed the playbook for Native solidarity in the 21st century. This is Standing Rock, the pipeline protest that united Natives. The Dakota Access Pipeline, often shortened to DAPL, was designed to move crude oil roughly 1,100+ miles from North Dakota through multiple states. Britannica. For the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe, the concern wasn't abstract. They argued the pipeline threatened their water supply and cultural resources, and that it crossed lands tied to treaty guarantees, specifically invoking the Fort Laramie Treaty and the tribe's undisturbed use and occupation argument in the public educational record, Smithsonian NMAI. And there's a detail that became symbolic. Reporting cited by the Smithsonian resource notes the pipeline was originally planned to cross near Bismarck, but was moved after concerns that a spill could threaten that city's drinking water. The tribe and supporters asked, if that risk mattered there, why not here? This is where the conflict begins. Not only pipeline versus protest, but whose safety counts and whose consent is treated as optional. This is where the conflict begins. Not only pipeline versus protest, but whose safety counts and whose consent is treated as optional. In 2016, a protest camp formed, Sacred Stone, and what started local began to draw national attention. Youth organizers played a visible role. The Smithsonian's NK360 material highlights how Oceti's Sakowin youth and allies organized a long relay run to Washington, D.C., delivering petitions and helping inspire a growing encampment near the construction site. The camp wasn't just logistics, it was identity, it was prayer, it was community under pressure. And it became something else, too, a test of how the United States treats Indigenous sovereignty when corporate timelines are already moving. By late July 2016, the conflict moved into federal court. ABC's timeline notes that attorneys for the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe filed a complaint against the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers over the permitting process, marking a major legal turning point. The tribe's position, echoed across sources, was consistent. The pipeline risked water, crossed culturally significant areas, and was approved without meaningful consultation at the level the tribe believed was required. At the same time, supporters arrived. Tribal flags appeared, horses appeared, and the world began to watch. On September 3, 2016, the world saw images that changed the scale of attention overnight. ABC reports a clash between protesters and private security workers, where witnesses said pepper spray was used and dogs were deployed. Authorities disputed the framing and described protesters as aggressive. ABC News. Whatever someone believed politically, that day made one thing undeniable. This was no longer a quiet dispute. It was a national test of conscience and a national test of power. On September 9th, a federal judge denied the tribe's request for a temporary injunction, while acknowledging historical harms in the language quoted by ABC News. But the same day, ABC notes 3 federal agencies made an unusual move, requesting a voluntary pause and stating that construction on Army Corps land bordering or under Lake Oahe would not go forward at this time, while the Army determined whether it needed to reconsider earlier decisions. ABC News. This is the heartbeat of Standing Rock: law, land, and legitimacy moving in different directions, and everyone feeling the friction. As summer turned into fall, the movement grew. Britannica describes how resistance launched by Standing Rock Sioux members drew thousands of supporters across the United States, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, turning Standing Rock into a national focal point. Smithsonian NK 360 Degrees describes how runs, horseback rides, and marches helped build momentum, and how many Native nations and allies traveled to join the camp, even as clashes and arrests intensified. Smithsonian NMI. This was not just protest, it was a living coalition, built in real time. By November 2016, international attention included human rights scrutiny. A UN human rights expert, Mni Wiconi, accused U.S. security forces of using excessive force against protesters, describing an increasingly militarized response, alleging the use of rubber bullets, tear gas, and other weapons, and raising concerns about detention conditions. OHCHR. The UN statement also emphasized a core principle: even if some actions become violent, responses must be proportionate and must not erase the rights of peaceful assembly for everyone. OHCHR. Standing Rock had become a mirror, reflecting how America responds when a corporate project meets a mass movement that refuses to disappear. Then came a moment many supporters remember as a turning point. In December 2016, Earth Justice reported that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers announced it would not grant an easement under Lake Oahe for the pipeline to cross, half a mile upstream of the Standing Rock Sioux Tribe reservation, and that it planned to prepare an environmental impact statement considering alternative routes. Earth Justice's statement framed it as a major victory, crediting tribal youth, thousands at the camps, and global solidarity, and emphasizing that a thorough EIS and meaningful discussion should have happened before permits were issued. For a moment, it felt like the system had finally paused long enough to listen. But Standing Rock was about to learn a hard lesson. A pause is not the same thing as protection. In January 2017, the political weather changed fast. President Donald Trump issued a presidential memorandum directing the Army and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers to review and approve DAPL-related requests in an expedited manner, including easements and approvals, while also directing consideration of rescinding the December 2016 decision and withdrawing the notice of intent to prepare an EIS. Britannica summarizes the overall arc plainly. Obama's administration stopped construction, and that decision was reversed after Trump took office, with construction finished in 2017. Then came the clearing of the camp. A North Dakota Joint Information Center release states that on February 23, 2017, law enforcement entered the Oceti Sakowin camp area around 10:45 a.m. and that all inhabitants were officially cleared by 2:09 p.m., with a total of 46 arrests reported in that release. Standing Rock's visible chapter was closing, but the story, legally and culturally, was not over. To understand why the fight continued, you have to understand how it was permitted. NRDC argues the Army Corps used a fast-tracked approach, evaluating water crossings individually through Nationwide Permit 12, instead of assessing the pipeline as one major project, which NRDC says reduced scrutiny under NEPA and the Clean Water Act's public review processes. NRDC also notes DAPL crosses waterways 202 times, and it describes later court findings that criticized the adequacy of environmental review, illustrating how Standing Rock became both a protest movement and a long-running legal struggle. So when people ask, did Standing Rock win? The honest answer is, Standing Rock changed what winning even looks like, because it forced the country to confront the gap between legal permission and moral legitimacy. Even sources that focus on the pipeline's completion still emphasize the protest's scale and impact. Britannica notes it drew thousands of supporters and became a defining campaign of 2016-2017. Smithsonian's educational resource frames Standing Rock as a story of sovereignty, treaty arguments, youth organizing, and cultural survival, showing why this wasn't just politics, it was identity, land, and future generations. Standing Rock didn't end extraction, it didn't end pipelines, but it did something rarer. It united Native nations in public, visible solidarity, and it taught millions of people a phrase they will never forget: water is life. If you want more documentaries told with care, subscribe. And in the comments, answer this: what do you think Standing Rock changed more, the law or the culture? Because history isn't only written by presidents and corporations. Sometimes it's written by a camp that